Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the session 2A, Big Shifts for Sustained Data and AI-Driven Outcomes. It is our pleasure to have Ken Kryst and Sachin Khairnar from PwC, and I'd like to hand it over to Ken and Sachin. Ken.
Good, Ken.
Thanks, Robert. Sachin, you want to kick things off?
Yeah. Welcome, everyone. My name is Sachin Khairnar. I'm a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers Consulting. I've had the privilege and the joy of participating in this conference over the last several years, having been part of the panels or hosting panels with some of the key clients. So I'm excited to be back at this event with our esteemed panel today. We have, and I'll let the panel introduce themselves. We have our clients from Lumen Technologies, as well as, unfortunately, one of our panel members had last-minute emergency, so he could not join. We were expecting client from Tokyo Electron, so he sent his apologies. We also have PwC's own Global and US Chief Data Officer, Pat Minton, as well. What we will cover today is really a key set of shifts our clients and colleagues have undertaken to really drive the outcomes that data analytics and AI solutions and capabilities can deliver. We've covered individual topics in last several conferences, but today we want to cover what really matters in terms of the shift that is needed in some of the capabilities that are either table stakes or transformative. So that's what we'll focus on today in terms of how you can make certain changes. These capabilities years ago used to be an afterthought. Nowadays it's front and center. Things like data as well as insights are more important than the applications that either create the data or consume insights. So how do you get there? And that's why we have the panel talking about it. Before I let the panel introduce themselves, I'll ask my partner Ken to introduce him before we go to the panel.
Hey, thanks, Sachin. Yes, Ken Kryst. I'm also a partner with PwC's data and analytics practice. We call it Analytic Insights. As part of our new equation and the marketing that we're doing now. Like Sachin, I have been involved with the MIT CDO conference for about 7 years. I do miss going up to Cambridge, but I've seen the event grow over the years. It's wonderful to see. I'm glad that we continue to be an instrumental part of it, and very happy to be here today. With what Sachin was saying with regards to the big shifts and a lot of the demands on the CDO and supporting those big shifts, I'm looking forward to the discussion today with the panel and the questions from all of you, hopefully. So with that, I think, Sachin, do we want to turn it over and let Tobin introduce himself?
Yeah.
Thank you, Sachin. Ken, Tobin Thomas. I'm a VP for Data Enablement, AI, and Automation at Lumen Technologies. So prior to this, I used to be with Lockheed Martin Space as a Chief Data and Analytics Officer, and prior to that with Raytheon Technologies. So at Lumen, we continuously leverage a unique combination of global networks, cloud, edge, security, and data to help companies adopt to the fourth industrial revolution. And data is such a critical element. Lumen is continuously working to enhance its critical data-driven operations to better, one, from an external customer standpoint, as well as internal customers. So data is a key element of majority of our discussions, along with discussions at the SLT level. So super excited to be here having this discussion with the panel today.
Great. Thank you, Tobin. Pat.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. And I appreciate Dr. Wang and the ability to join everybody today. I think I've probably attended more of these than anybody at this point. This is at least year 9, possibly year 10 at this point for me. But like Ken and Sachin, I'm a partner at PwC. I used to be a member of our analytics consulting practice. And, you know, as PwC has continued their journey to build out our capabilities and make data and data management and the use of data as a critical business asset part of our strategic agenda, we've really doubled down on the role of the Chief Data Officer, in no small part due to the efforts of Dr. Wang and the MIT community that we've been a part of for quite a while now. I've got two roles, as mentioned at the beginning. The way that our firm is structured, we're actually operated as a network of member firms. So across 158 countries around the world, we have independent firms that are a part of the PwC network. I serve as the US-based Chief Data Officer for the US firm, but then I also have the distinct privilege of being our global Chief Data Officer, helping to coordinate and help all our member firms actually stand up and build their own Chief Data Officer communities within their own territories. And we've really been on this journey now for the last couple of years as we've built out that community. And I think at this point, we have about 90% of all of our territories, which have a Chief Data Officer in place within the PwC network. And so I think that really speaks to the importance that we place on data and data to support our strategic agenda. So look forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Tobin, Pat. Why don't we get started? As I mentioned earlier, the focus today is not on one individual topic, but key shifts or what is really working on broad set of topics to really drive the strategic outcomes, some of those that Tobin and Pat alluded to. I mean, based on our experience with clients and our own experience internally and the research, what we are seeing is the continuous evolution in terms of the pull for data and insights into the points of action where businesses and field are actually working in the field in addition to the strategic decision making. So that's one of the kind of key evolution of the paradigm we are seeing in the space that is creating a different set of demand, frankly, pressures on data analytic capabilities as well as the delivery teams on how they are really meeting up that demand. And that really is at the heart of the fourth industrial revolution point that Tobin made. In addition to the doing things differently to accelerate the outcomes for strategic decision making for internal for leadership as well. So we've really outlined the big shifts in 6 or 7 different categories, right? So it's really how the data lifecycle and the model lifecycle, whether it is analytics model or AI model, how do they need to change? What are the platform enablement and modernization requirements and the changes that are being undertaken, and how all of this ecosystem is being governed, not just from kind of a data mastery and kind of data policy perspective, but overall governance of this ecosystem. So those are kind of 3 fundamental kind of big shift areas. I mean, though the areas themselves are not big shift, that's given. It's the if you double click on it, that's what I will ask panel to focus on. And then there are other soft aspects that are really harder to achieve, which is primarily around kind of talent upskilling, managing the trust of the teams themselves, as well as the trustworthiness of the data and algos. So those are some of the areas that we'll cover. But let me start with some of the shifts. Tobin, you are kind of driving at Lumen, where we are working in terms of the life cycle of the data and model itself, and how it is really driving the outcomes that are possible.
Yeah, such an absolutely an interesting topic for all of us who are grew up in the data and the AI space, right? So you've heard data. At the end of the day, it's all about leverage, right? The way that I think about it is, you know, it's really leverage that we go after, right? Is it available at the right time? Is it in the right form and at the right place? And we have talked about it before. What we are fundamentally seeing or driving across our businesses, you know, a persona-based approach to consumption of data, right? You know, and the way that we think about it is, you know, think about a data scientist or a business analyst or a business consumer. The way that they want to actually consume the data is at different flavors, right? And we've been focusing on how do you increase that leverage and make data available to these personas, right? So at Lumen, we've been focused on that, leaning into this persona-based approach for data consumption. And I'll give you two just high-level, highly strategic initiatives that we've been driving data enablement through measurement, targeted metrics, and outcome-based approach, right? So the one is we have established what we call the AI COE at Lumen. And the unique portion about this is this concept of distributed pod based teams, right? Focused on model lifecycle. And you think about each of these pods as a combination of multiple roles that come together. There would be a business me, there's a data scientist, a data engineer, and the infrastructure support that forms a pod. And at any point in time, there might be multiple pods that are running in terms of accelerating these use cases and in parallel executing these use cases, right? And that's how we are driving in terms of model development, agility, as well as acceleration in terms of outcomes, right? Now, as we started establishing and maturing these AI COEs and the center of excellence, right, we have close to almost 70 plus use cases in the pipeline that's going to adopt this pod maze model that I just talked about. Now, I do want to actually talk about the other example as well, data governance. We talk about the long tail or the long pole. Just quickly want to mention that, right, around domain mastery. And what we are doing is prioritize domains in terms of business outcomes. So in 2021, for example, we have prioritized 4 domains that are highly strategic in nature, that are key from a revenue outcome perspective for the business. And we are driving acceleration on domain mastery of those 7 domains that we prioritized by the senior steering team, which is essentially VP level participation from the business, prioritizing these domains in terms of outcomes, right? So it's super exciting to be, especially at the time we are in, where capabilities and the technology is available, and the business equally excited in order for us to actually drive outcomes. So I hope that helps in terms of how it's 2 flavors that I just talked about, but how we are trying to accelerate in terms of looking at measurable outcomes as well as benefits and value to the business.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very consistent with some of the approaches that we've taken, right? We've definitely taken the persona-based approach, understanding that we have hundreds of thousands of employees at PwC, our staff who actually work with our clients every day. And all of them have a varying degree of needs around being able to manage data, wrangle data, perform advanced analytics, and even AI, machine learning development, and things like that. But the other thing that's a little bit different is, in the last month or two, we've announced our reinforced or revised strategy around the new equation, where we're really focused on helping our clients to establish trust-based solutions and deliver sustainable outcomes for the longer term. And the underpinning of every bit of this is our data capabilities. And we've seen that through the efforts that we've done to upskill our teams across the world, but also shifting also to developing products that we're selling out into the market. So it's a big pivot for our firm in our 165-year history, where going from a traditional services-based model to also offering products that are accelerators or solutions that our customers can actually purchase and use from us requires us to think about both how we use the data and how we govern the data. But all of these products are driven off of artificial intelligence, whether it's helping clients to understand their current staffing needs and their current staff, their training levels, where they need to upskill their individuals to meet the demands of the workforce of the future, or all of the other pieces that we're selling out into the marketplace. They all have that AI and machine learning embedded in it. And with that comes the responsibility and the need to be able to, both make the data available, make sure it's of high quality, make sure it's mastered or managed appropriately to support those needs, but then really importantly governed on top of that in this ever-changing landscape and regulatory environment that we're in, especially on a global basis, because the laws and regulations and sovereignty issues are very different as you traverse around the globe. So it's a really challenging time, but it speaks to where we truly have put data right in the heart of our entire strategy, and it's a really exciting time to be there.
I mean, thanks, Tobin and Pat. Let me kind of probe a little bit on this topic. Right. So, persona-based approach and putting this at the front and center or heart of your the business strategy, that's a fundamental shift that you called out. But in terms of when the rubber hits the ground in terms of delivery, what challenges or lessons that you have addressed, or the delivery lifecycle process itself, whether it is agile delivery or others, to be able to deliver and bring the rest of the enterprise along in this journey. So, Tobin, I know we are kind of looking at a model ops and data ops approach to this. So, it would be good if you can kind of share more on that. That's where some of the lessons are coming, and I saw some of the questions coming as well on that one.
Yeah, and it's a classic challenge as well, right? In terms of, do you lay the foundation, or how do we deliver the value on time, right? And that's something that we've been seeing across the board in some of our use cases. And one of the approach that we have taken is to be able to, one, prioritize, second, in terms of being able to look at it in terms of the use cases and ensure that the guardrails as well as the architecture is laid out so that, one, it can actually service the use case in terms of the capabilities, but also, as the models are ready to scale, they're able to actually start adopting to the new architecture, right? So those are some of the pieces, right, from a practicality standpoint that we're seeing in order for us to start leveraging some of the business benefits. You have to take the lead, but also ensure that it is laid out in an architecture that can actually scale from a future perspective.
Great, thanks, Tobin. I know we have Lee on the panel now. He was able to join. So Lee, thanks for joining. I know you're dealing with something that came up. So do you mind introducing yourself? We went through a round of introduction. Thanks for joining again.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm Lee Green. I'm the director here for business intelligence, enterprise data warehousing at Tokyo Electron. We're a maker of equipment for and manufacturing equipment that make semiconductors, right? So Intel, Samsung, and Micron are three of our biggest customers amongst a few. We're a company that has like a high cost product and a small customer base, and we also spend a lot of time trying to make sure those machines run well, make sure we understand our order forecast, because as you've seen recently in industry, it's not simple to go and add a bunch of capacity in this space, right? So a good example is the automotive industry, right? So they decided as a part of COVID to downplay their forecast, cancel some orders with some semiconductor facilities, some semiconductor makers, and those same chip makers decided to fill that capacity, right? Often with a lot of the peripherals and IoT stuff that everybody needed all of a sudden. And then to get capacity back in, it's not an instantaneous thing. You can't add our machines to a building, in a corner. They end up having to build brand new facilities, or having to adjust forecasts and schedules and cancel purchase orders to add a new capacity. So that's one of the things we spend a lot of time working on, is making sure our data helps our customers be successful, helping ensure that we understand how our own performance internally as a company works really well. And we're starting to really get into more heavy conversation about machine availability, predictive maintenance, machine uptime, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, because it's not something that you want to have a failure or an unknown. So I'm sorry to join late, but I'm happy to be here.
Great. Well, thanks, Lee. And it's perfect segue into our next kind of focus area, which is around how does platform enablement and the kind of overall ecosystem needs to shift to be able to meet these demands that each of you have shared. Especially, let me start with you, Lee, on this topic. Since you called out machine enablement, predictive maintenance, the consumer-related demands are very well known in the sectors that you and Tobin operate in. Machine consumption and preparing data for driving machine excellence, as well as the predictive maintenance of the machines is something that we are continuing to see and work on. So what's your experience in terms of evolving the platform architecture, and what are the key shifts that you've delivered there?
I think there's been a couple shifts, right? So first off, I after joining the company, I was sort of surprised, to be fair, that a company like Intel or Samsung would need the machine provider to tell them more about machine uptime and machine availability. But as it turns out, while they run proprietary recipes on how to use our machines, we also have proprietary operation standards on our machines that not all of our customers get to see, right? So we offer warranties, we offer service by the hour, we offer the ability to keep our machines up, and the investment there goes well beyond just a traditional, predictive maintenance algorithm. We're actually starting to get into looking at machine failures, tracking it back to our application systems, like our warranty systems, into our master data about our machines that we've sold, and trying to come up with trends and prediction. And that's, I think initially it was pushed hard by our customers because they wanted more uptime for their machines, and they wanted more yield, more quality out of their machines, because these microchips are so hard to test. You can't really test, a sample very well. You end up with you can have a whole batch fail because of some unknown, right? So now that when the customers are pushing, it actually pushed us as a Japanese company. We're generally a little conservative, but to be out in front to say we need to stay, if we want a competitive advantage, we not only need to meet our customer needs, but we need to extrapolate that across to our other customers and have a competency of doing it, right? So we're probably still early on in a lot of the how do we offer this, or how do we make this a viable thing that other customers are really going to want. But I don't think it's probably obtuse for a lot of companies to get pushed by one of their major customers, make some advances, figure some things out, and then realize they can do something with it. Which is where we're at. So the investment profile that used to be sort of, we have to do this, or it's something that the customer requires us to do, is now turning into, hey, this is something that can make us a better competitor against people in our market.
Great. Let me kind of probe on it a little bit, because based on our experience, sometimes getting access to the data in the remote factories to be able to do these type of analysis is harder, and then processing that telemetry or the machine telemetry. So how have you approached, to the extent you can share, to address that challenge and processing that data, and if there is any cloud involved to be able to enable that? Right. Lee, that was for you.
Oh, I thought you said to Tobin. I apologize. No, that is absolutely the truth. A lot of our customers are, we're still basically working through it in small buckets. So a lot of our customers won't allow their information to leave the facility, much less go to the cloud, right? So we've created, for some of our major customers, we created some data transfer methods that don't go through the cloud, that in some cases require hand over to our technician, who then transmits it to our network, right? But then we are working heavier to say, hey, I think that it's an easier answer if we come up with an instantiated, secure path to the same cloud that we can share, whether that be a Snowflake platform or a Gov cloud, or it doesn't really matter. There's something out there that we can both have shared access, since we both allow each other to have the data to be able to transfer things, right? We have talked more and more about adding an add-on to the machines themselves. So a data collector, whether it be an actual physical item or a piece of software, and then making sure that those standards meet our customer needs. it's not a simple path, right? Because I think it's such a the machine market is competitive, right? But the semiconductor market is even more competitive, right? So they really don't want their recipes and their advances and their understandings to be anywhere else but inside their own hands, which is probably like for most manufacturers of things, but it seems to be extra intolerant in the world of semiconductors. So baby steps, I think, is one way I would say, and we're working through a proof of concept now, just trying to show that we can some data that I would consider to be not significantly restrictive. We're going to use that as our proof of concept and do some conjoined efforts with one of our customers. So that's kind of step one as we go to try to do this more and more.
Great, thank you, Lee. Pat, let me kind of ask the platform-related shifts. Given data and insights is such a critical component and at the heart of PwC's strategy. So can you share a little bit around the platform strategy you've driven for the firm to really enable the persona-based, citizen-based kind of innovation approach that PwC is driving?
Yeah. So just like you said, we've been on that journey for a while now. So recognizing this a few years ago, we put significant investment into developing a global data platform. So cloud-based, globally deployed, available across our entire network. I would tell you that the physical creation and deployment of the data platform is fairly challenging, and all the capabilities that it has to enable for all of our different teams serving all of our different clients and all the different ways that we work with our clients. It's really, really hard to capture all the different, patterns that it needs to enable, or the technologies that it needs to have in place to enable the capabilities, whether it's building and launching and running an AI, model, or whether it's simply ingesting data automatically out of an ERP system so that we don't have to work with the client and get that data, in a more manual fashion on a project by project basis. But I would say the biggest challenge that we've had is simply the governance around how to deploy this within the complex legal and regulatory environment that exists around the world. Right? Different countries have very different restrictions on what data can reside where, what data can be shared. There's obviously privacy implications that you've got to take into account when you're talking about PII or other sensitive data. And all of this creates a very, very, very complex and tight interwoven set of complexities that we have to work through as we deploy this platform. And again, the platform has kind of a couple of different flavors to it. One being, this is the baseline that all of our products run on. So it's the cloud base that allows us to deploy products around the world, but it also has what we call our workbench capabilities, which puts in the hands of our individual staff members all around the world, almost every single one of them now, the tools where they can go onto our cloud-based platform, they can open up a workbench, they can move their clients' data in there, they can perform data visualization, data wrangling, build AI models. We've got a whole suite of tools and technologies that are available for them to add into their workbench, create all of this wonderful content that they can then share with their clients in the course of delivering the engagements that we perform. And so all of that requires both upskilling everybody to be able to do those things. It requires building that big cloud-based platform and deploying it around the world legally and within all the sovereignty and regulatory challenges, and then governing it pretty tightly. As we think about the responsibility that we have for the various types of data that we're moving through this environment, we have to have really good governance and responsibility in place to make sure that we're ethically and responsibly treating this data with the care and respect that it needs, and managing it appropriately throughout its life cycle as we, work with our clients.
Great.
Pat, it's I think the concept of governance, I'm glad you brought it up as part of the data platform discussion, and I wanted to direct this question to Tobin and then to Lee. What we've seen with our clients, especially say the last 4 or 5 years, is a pretty big uptick in the interest. We're having a lot more conversations. We're engaging in a lot more projects with clients around data governance. So I think more and more people, we talked at the outset about the momentum that the CDO conference has had. I would say the same things from a governance perspective. We've seen a lot of momentum in that regard. We've seen a lot of momentum in the role, the emerging role of the chief data officer. But people understanding that governance is a key component to realizing, unlocking the value of data and being able to enable some of the big shifts that we're talking about. So I kind of had a three-part question for Tobin and Lee. And the first one is, are you seeing something similar? The second thing is, what are you doing at your respective organizations with regards to governance? And the third thing, Pat mentioned some of the challenges, but like, what are some of the challenges that both of you are seeing with implementing these type of constructs?
Yeah, Ken, I can jump in. So absolutely, I resonate with the thoughts you had around data governance and some of the the platform capabilities that Pat was talking about, right? What we're primarily driving is a concept called the data marketplace, right? It's a 3-pillar strategy, and it's not a platform as such, right? It's the and it's not a thing, right? It's the strategy and execution of a product-based concept around data, right? And we've been driving this 3-pillar strategy for our data marketplace, essentially connecting the information producers to the consumers, right? We talk about democratizing data and evangelizing data and things like that, but we've been focused on being that providing that marketplace, connecting the consumers and the producers, right? I'll get to the data governance topic, and it's important that we talk about this and how we are layering the governance around this, right? Because as we start thinking about connecting information consumers to, or the information producers to the consumers, right? What comes up as part of the 3-step strategy that I talked about is this concept of distributed domain-driven architecture, right? To be able to easily consume and serve and pull models that's available out there, right? To be able to create self-service platform designs, whether it's in terms of APIs or self-service related services or that can be tapped into, kind of this product-based thinking itself, right? API-centric, discoverable, trustworthy, and so forth, right? So as we started thinking about the data marketplace strategy itself, that's where we started layering beyond the traditional governance. What are some of the key, the key measures and the outcomes that you'd want to govern the data marketplace with, right? That's when your, the business leaders in terms of the senior steering committee started coming in, the domain leads in terms of which elements, right, from a domain mastery as well as from a contextual perspective that needs to be prioritized, leveraging the steering committees and the business leaders for that, as well as active domain participation in terms of accelerating and making these data sets available becomes a key component. Now, as we started doing that, what we also have released across the board is recipes in terms of as new domains are onboarded. We have kind of adopted a 12-step data maturity kind of a recipe that we would onboard new domains so that we're not reinventing the wheel every time, right? So we've invented, or let me take that back, right? It's not an invention as such, right? But it's kind of this recipe that we can actually reuse. And we have started adopting that for multiple domains across the board, right? Along with that, what's also critical is we've started measuring data quality and creating scorecards so that we can continuously measure progress and show benefits, right? I saw one of the questions out there that was asking kind of, how do we prove benefits around these activities, right? Creating such scorecards to say, here's where the needle is moving in terms of domain mastery, and here's how we are delivering value becomes a critical element, or it's almost the other side of the coin, right? To be able to show here's how the business is benefiting becomes a key element, right? So we've been driving some of that across our governance practice, keeping in mind the overarching data marketplace storyline that I just talked about. Ken, I hope that helps.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tobin.
Yeah,
Lee,
Tobin, yeah,
you wanna
sure.
add to that?
First off, I would like to applaud Tobin for trying to remove the word governance from the conversation, because I think that's actually and focusing more on a data marketplace and data availability. Because I think one of the struggles that I've seen with governance in the last 5 years, 6 years of trying to establish it many times is governance sounds like data restriction, data unavailability, when it's supposed to be about ensuring that what is there is right and trusted. Right, so it's supposed to be an enabling function, and it's often not treated that way. Right, it's about that's one of the reasons why in a lot of ways we've dealt with data here. We've gotten away from data owners. Owners sound like restricted. Those are application kind of terms where somebody owns a particular part of an application, and therefore has to attest that the people have the right access. But from a data availability perspective, you definitely want to make the most amount of data available to the most amount of people, right? So you definitely want to start by enabling first, and then finding the pieces of data that you want to restrict, or the pieces of data that you want to govern in some way. I have also noticed that I think that just data governance in general, like I said, felt like a roadblock to some people, or like a speed bump, to getting to the data they needed. And now I find a lot more of our high data users, even our leaders, prefer it. They would want to be able to know when I go and use, as Tobin said, this API or this data connectivity or this thing, that it's going to be as advertised, right? And so that gives them a lot less of the data wrangling and the data activity they have to do to get to their answer. One of the things I think we've really, when it comes to governance too, is we've really tried to respect the difference in patterns, right? So if you're an end user that runs very similar things throughout a month, your governance is probably pretty high, because you want those things to be exactly the same every time you interact with them. But if you're working with machine data and trying to come up with new ideas, we've created labs and sandboxes for those people. They can't promote out of it. They can't share beyond a very limited sharing method, but they can do rapid prototyping and work through data sets. And then we have a process of moving that information back through our environment to where now it can be shared in an enterprise fashion. And I think, and that's starting to take a lot of hold. People are very interested in being able to, especially if you're more on the data science side as to a business intelligence side, they tend to want to be able to rapidly prototype and fail fast and not have to go through all the governance processes. But once they have something they want to instantiate and operationalize, then they're more than happy to have it run through some sort of governance to where it can actually be used by the masses. And I think that's really been known. I think the one size fits all governance, means that it doesn't really fit anyone well, right? And so that's one of the things we've learned over the last few years.
Hey,
That's
Ken,
awesome.
hey, Sachin, I just want to jump in there. I mean, I think that's spot on, Lee. And I think, within our environment, like the corollaries are 100% aligned, right? As I mentioned, we deployed this data platform, which has a workbench capability. This is the sandbox that we put in every single project team's hands, where they can download the tools that they want. If they want to build AI models, we've got the tools right there. They can just add it to their workbench. They want to do data wrangling, data virtualization. It gives them the full suite of tools they can deploy into their workbench and do what we call our citizen-led development. We then have the second piece of that, which is another global application and platform that we have called Digital Lab. And Digital Lab allows a citizen that went and developed a solution, a model, a virtualization, a visualization, whatever it is, when they have something that feels like it's worthy to be shared with others, we have a formal process in place where they can submit it up to the Digital Lab team. We have a team that curates all of these things that come in from the 300,000+ people that are doing this around the world, and goes through a process to curate the good ideas, make sure they're not repetitive with ideas that are already there. But once it actually makes it through that process, we promote this into our Digital Lab. And Digital Lab is basically an application marketplace of approved, shareable, whether it's an AI model or a data model, or it's a visualization, et cetera, automation of some form of bot or anything like that, where we can then share that across the entire PwC network. And every one of our staff members have access to this. So when they go to perform a task, they can automatically go to Digital Lab and figure out, do we already have a solution for this? They can download it into their workbench and go and customize or run the automation or the model or whatever it is that they're wanting to do. So very, very, very similar construct and model. We've actually come quite a long ways. We have 500, or not 500, over 5,000 assets in our Digital Lab environment that are being shared around the global network now. And then one of the things that we've done was looking at those citizen-led applications that were developed and became more business-led. We then opened up the marketplace to the entire world, where we now have a product that we call Digital on Demand, where we recognize that some of these solutions would be of benefit to others that are out there. So you can actually go to Digital on Demand, and it's a product where you can go and you can parse our library of assets that are available, you know, as a company or a corporation to go and download and use these assets yourself. So what started as people doing work sitting on their laptop, we then moved into the cloud in a more holistic fashion, in a more standard and secure platform environment. And then we established a formal marketplace with curation around it so that we could make sure that we're sharing the most valuable assets and retiring assets, right? Because times change. And then now we've taken that next step of taking it out to the market and making those ideas that we think would be of value to our customers actually available for consumption through the same basic platform and premise. So I just wanted to share that because it was like super aligned with what you were talking about there.
Makes sense.
Great, thank you, Pat. And that really underscores the point you made earlier. Is that's how the data insights capability is at the heart and front and center of our business strategy itself. Right? And there was one question around how are we seeing organizations shift from the tactical bottoms-up effort to holistic transformation driven by data and ML. What Pat just talked about now and earlier is an example of that. The examples and the approaches Tobin and Lee mentioned are really putting it in the front and in the heart of the business strategy and not getting conceptual agreement, but real agreement, real commitment, and the ongoing measurement of it. That's the additional insight I would share is some of our customers, as well as many companies, are starting to put a % of their budget aside, top down, on an annual basis, as well as the evolved CapGov, OpGov processes to be able to focus on the execution of the transformation throughout the year versus quarterly kind of business case efforts and taking kind of 30% of the time in the year in proving the value versus actually delivering the value.
Sachin, I just wanted to comment on something real quick. You mentioned that because I think that's something that I noticed too, as I reminded some people in a past company that, hey, now that we're going to make this investment, we're going to treat data like assets. It's something we do now, right? It's not a project anymore. As soon as you stop treating it like an asset, as soon as you pretend like the project's over, it starts to erode, right, immediately, and new innovations avoided, right? So I think your point there to say that setting aside money, people, time, and treating it like a real product of your company as something that you value has to happen, or you'll never really keep sustained progress.
Great. Let me shift to the software aspect. I think we already shifted into that, but let's focus on some of those areas. Pat, let me start with you actually, since you talked about upskilling a couple of times already. So one of the, and that's related to the elements of the transformative shifts as well, is the talent that delivers data analytics and AI solutions, that the users that consume it and the ultimate kind of beneficiaries. There's evolution that's happening, upscaling that needs to be done to be able to address and achieve the outcomes and drive the benefits out of it. Pat, what's been your experience in driving that at PwC? What would you share with the audience in terms of what really mattered?
Well, I think this is an area where our leadership and what Lee was just talking about there, right? they made the commitment several years ago now that this is our strategy. It's not a one and done. We don't get done with that data and now we're done and we can move on to something else. It's not a project and this is a journey. And I would extend that out beyond just data, but into, digital capabilities and skills that you can use data to actually create value with it. So our approach was that we have a wealth of really highly qualified, talented people within the firm all around the world. And in order to harness the power of that, what we needed to do was make sure that every single person in the firm had the digital skills to be able to evolve and continue to challenge ourselves in that citizen-led development of capabilities in helping our clients. So literally what we did was we developed digital academies where we went around the entire world, where we would stand up classes of everything from 30 people to 200 people and run them through multi-day training exercises where we would bring in vendors to help train on specific technologies. Our teams would help develop training and provide training around some of the more basic data platform capabilities that we're building and rolling out there, and really giving our teams capabilities and skills in data wrangling, artificial intelligence, data visualization, automation through bot development and things like that. So it's almost a choose your own adventure depending on the type of work that you do, where you wanted to focus your time and do your upskilling. But we took a leave no person behind methodology to this, where we gave every single person in the firm that opportunity, made that available, which again, in a global firm of hundreds of thousands of people is a massive investment on the leadership team's part. But we're starting to see the benefits of that, where we now have a workforce that's there that is highly fluent in being able to leverage data and build capabilities using that to help us serve our clients better. And that was our approach.
Thank you, Pat. Tobin, what would you add to that, given you are driving some of these shifts as well in terms of talent?
Yeah. I would follow what Pat just mentioned, right? It is a critical element, and it comes back to that persona-based approach that we talked about, right? How do we elevate and move people from, as you're thinking about the business analyst and the citizen data scientist, training becomes a key element, right? But you'll also have to think about the education and the upskilling at a leadership level around understanding the importance of data and how critical that is beyond the traditional way of thinking as an afterthought, right? So here at Lumen, it's certainly a focus. Even in my previous organization, we had a dedicated pillar that's focused on one, self-enablement in terms of the training and the education that's needed from a citizen data scientist. What are some of the capabilities or the courses that we could offer from a skill upliftment standpoint, but also executive level training or sessions that talks about here's why data is important, right? Here are the levers that. So we've seen this across industries, right? In terms of providing that support in terms of I wouldn't even call it soft skill or a soft aspect anymore. It almost needs to be, in my mind, a pillar of any CDO strategy as part of the overall equation.
Great, thank you. One of my clients, CFO, had called this as everybody in the finance organization as well as the external organization needs to be intimate with the data. And that's how it set the tone in terms of everybody getting upskilled, etc. Thank you, Pat and Tobin. I know we have about 10 minutes left. We've addressed a couple of questions. Let me jump to, we sort of discussed the shifts in financial management processes, but let me ask this to any of the panel members who wants to volunteer. Given the new economics that cloud brings to the table, based on the ingress and egress of the data and all the federated distributed models. How are you adjusting the financial management processes, operationalizing, treating data as an asset in reality, right? So what shifts have you taken? Is it, to the extent you can share, of course, this is very kind of sensitive topic specific to each organization, but what would you like audience to take away in terms of the shifts in financial management process, whether it is change in CapGov process, whether it's change in the way things get funded, etc. Because that's where we really see the shifts need to occur as well.
On our side, we're not reaching quite as many people as probably Pat is, or in some cases maybe as many as Tobin is. But we've tried to remind, while my organization still sits within IT, I think our organization gets called into a lot of different conversations, right? And so people are realizing that the investment is going to be required before we can have the outcome. So, granted, a lot of the investment has shifted into subscription-based services and whatnot, where we used to capitalize a lot of those licenses and stuff, and so maybe you could do multi-year planning a little easier. But I think we have in our organization, for example, have a very technology-forward CFO who knows that data availability is maybe one of the most important things that our IT team can bring. So some of the shifts that we've seen, and so the BI and data warehousing and data team here has tripled in size over the last 4 years, right? Whether that be with some with headcount, some with partnered providers, some with new tools. I will mention one thing is that it also requires us to care about how things used to be done, because it's not regardless of the new investment in data and the new investment in technology, nothing happens overnight. So we still have to prepare and manage all of those legacy things that are still providing business value, and try to figure out how to retire those and move them on to greener pastures, so we can use some of those resources, both people and money, to do bigger and better things. I think for our company, it's been a significantly easier conversation when it's customer requested, customer driven, but it's even gone beyond that right now. I think people are starting to see the efficiency of data availability and seeing that, hey, in some cases I can avoid having to grow a team for things that aren't really valuable, and I can then spend more time on. So I can automate over here on the left side, and I can spend more time on now the data I have available. And so our team kind of helps in both buckets. So I think in that respect, it's not been that hard to convince people that investing in our team is something you should do. And I've always been a proponent, if anybody takes something away, is start small, get a big win, as biggest win you can find, and then have that person, preferably someone with influence, speak on your behalf, right? Speak and tell the story of that win, because nothing's better than somebody, who's basically the witness out there explaining your value for you, if you want to try to get more investment, if you're still in that hurdle of trying to convince people it's the right thing. So that's what I would take away.
Thank you. So create a story and find a storyteller with you. Tobin, what would you add to that?
Pretty well, right? In terms of, across the board, as you start thinking about some of those elements, we have certainly been focused on, accelerating some of these capabilities and putting, some of these tools and capabilities in front of the business users. And it's certainly, what I would say is, some of those pilots or innovation hubs that we would want to actually accelerate. That's another way of thinking about it, right? It is okay to experiment. It is okay to fail. And if you're able to create such environments where you're able to start, providing those capabilities in the hands of business users, it becomes a win, right? And as you start, providing those solutions, you would see acceleration in terms of one from an adoption standpoint, but it also acts as a feedback loop in terms of the data enablement that I was talking about earlier on, what are the key elements that you need to, transform in order to support those use cases, right? So it's almost like a, bidirectional feedback loop that you get once you start, running the engine, right? And then you see it, in most journeys. I know it's a tough push up the hill, right? And like Lee said, it's not an overnight thing. But as you start moving the needle around some of these capabilities and making it available to the end users, you'll start seeing some of the benefit where you're seeing excitement and the acceleration in terms of the adoption, right? So that's another piece that I would add, to say, don't shy away. Go experiment, go figure out it is okay to fail. Put these capabilities in the hands of the end users, and let's go innovate.
One thing I'd add to that, Tobin, real quick, is because I think you were talking about innovating with, so building it with people is always easier than building it for people, right? So in a lot of cases, if you're immature in your data availability, that means there's data silos. There's people out there doing something to create business value on their own. In some cases, the person, 2 hallways down might be doing 85% the same thing. They just don't know each other. They don't interact. So building a community is a great place to start too, to start to try to, even if you're doing nothing, no investment, no anything, build a chapter of people who care about the same thing and bring them together and start talking about it. And that'll create a lot of value. Then when you actually have some investment, one piece of advice, because I've done this right and wrong in my career, is when you want to try to build something that's more uniform and enterprise that everybody's going to do, you may not want to always start with the person who has the best data silo, because they have really, really ingrained opinions about how they built what they have. You may want to start with somebody that has a lot of data availability and is a little bit more immature on how they care, not immature personality wise, but immature in their usage, because then they don't care as much about your procedures or your inability to do XYZ. They care, they're starved for data, they're starved for data availability. So if you can work with them, they have a lot of data, they can't get to it, don't know how to use it in a good use case. That'd be a great place to start than trying to tackle the person with a really crafted data silo that probably won't have a lot of patience in some cases down the road, or your process is not working like they expect.
Great. I think you already started to help me wrap this session with your kind of advice and takeaways for the audience. So thank you, Tobin and Lee. Thank you for sharing your insights and some of the shift that you're driving and the experiences that you've had there. As always, we run out of time talking about the real shifts, what's really working, what are the challenges in this subject matter specifically. So thank you to the panel. What I would summarize the discussion with is, many CEOs have said this is the age of data and insights, right? So data and insights matter more than the applications that create data or the operations that consume it. The discussion today really focused on some of the practical shifts our esteemed panelists have really driven or undertaking to be able to achieve that age of data within their organizations. We would like to, on behalf of PwC, I would like to thank the panel members and just one takeaway for the client, and I would ask Pat to add as well, since you've not had a chance to do that. One takeaway for the audience here is, do not give up. This is a complex field. It's still a complex field. Do not give up. Do not shy away from pushing your agenda, because you will be the superstar once you start having the wins. I mean, you will be the go-to superstar. So do not give up. So for the fellow CDOs or the practitioners here, that's the path I've been taking in this. I've built my career around this. So that's my kind of takeaway for the audience as well. Pat, what would you add to that?
Well, I guess just with the last second, I think Lee hit it spot on. And like my friend, Dr. Rich Wang always says, start small and move fast, right? And you're going to fail, and find those pieces to get started on, and good things will come.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Wang, MIT, and for the opportunity and audience for attending our session.
And many thanks indeed to PwC for your sponsorship. So thanks. We're all out of time. We'll see you at the 11:30 next section. Thanks, Tom, for doing this for us. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the conference. Bye.